All right. This episode is going to be a, kind of an interesting reflection because was it? I've been reading the book called "You Must Change Your Life," and it's basically a biography of Auguste Rodin and Rainer Maria Rilke. But to be honest, this book isn't just about their lives. This book is about an artist's life, and it can be basically just as it can basically have the same parallel as having an intellectual life. And something that really was eye-opening to me was how a lot of these people's love lives are, I don't know if I want to say not ideal, or is it that they're too real, um, that we can't even recognize, like we don't even know what love is, to a certain extent. Um, and so the reason why I bring that up is because Auguste Rodin, he what's interesting is that he gets married by a woman. He gets married by a woman he loves. But Auguste Rodin, he goes through like a basically a series of mistresses. There was one in particular that he grew very attached to. I believe Claudel. Um, but what I find is that Claudel was also a sculptress. She would sculpt, and she could never escape Rodin's shadow, essentially. Even when she did, like, try to run away from him, uh, and kind of go against him. So there's something about being a lover in the same field, about being a lover in the. But then I also realized that being not a lover in the same field almost allows for this subordinate position. Uh, for example, so Rodin's first, like Rodin's wife, um, she she just she just sustained him, and she stuck by it. She stuck by it, no matter despite knowing that Rodin was cheating. He had mistresses. I think at one point, technically, he even had another wife. Um, and well, not quite, but he basically broke up with her. He had to eventually break up with the other woman, but the first woman always stayed there and stuck by him. But I mean, it's a question of like, is that really love anymore? Um, Now, of course, what's interesting about like asking this type of question is that we start having a collision with our ideal of love and our what we think love should be like. But I think using artists and intellectuals' love lives as a case study might reveal something about you know uh, either you it's almost like either you love your work, or like you're gonna have to make it work with your um with your woman. That's the part that's scary. When I read this biography of Auguste Rodin and Rilke, is that none of their love lives worked out, in my opinion. Uh, Rodin had a wife in the background. She just sustained him. I don't think they had anything. It seems from the biographies that the, there wasn't anything more substantial than that. And then for Rilke, he he fell in love with Andrea Salome, the same woman that Nietzsche fell in love with. But eventually, like, nobody could really have Andrea Salome. See, that's the funny part. But she ended up playing a very important role in Rilke's life and sort of nurturing him in a sort of motherly way when he really needed help. But his wife, Westhoff, for Rilke, see, they were both artists, and so this is why when we compare Rodin's life with Rilke's love life, is that it seems like Rodin's love life, the wife kind of took like a back seat, right? And then she kind of like disappears in the background. And then there's Rilke's love life, where they decide to have they end up getting married, they end up having a child, and but the thing is, Rilke still wants to. He contradicts himself basically. He still wants to have his poetic life, and so he leaves Westhoff to take care of Ruth Rilke, and this creates some tension between him and Westhoff because one, Westhoff understands because she's an artist. So she knows what Rilke wants. She knows why Rilke is doing what he's doing, why he's traveling. He wants to sort of find his master and improve his writing and so on. But then Westhoff also is kind of like, having some tension with him because she also wants to do what he's doing, but she can't because she has Ruth to take care of. Well, as the biography kind of progresses, we start to see that Rilke lets both Westhoff and Rilke leave Ruth to her grandparents, and Westhoff joins Rilke to be taught by Rodin, um, and so they just start really going their own way as artists, you know, as artists. But the thing is, as they continue to kind of like, even though they're hanging out with each other and just continuously doing their own work as artists and stuff, that love that they had, and it ends up like fading in the background. And yeah, it ends up fading in the background, and eventually Westhoff asks for a divorce. Unfortunately, Rilke, because he traveled so much, it actually made it difficult for him to find like the jurisdiction to which he can get a divorce court or whatever. At least that's how I understand it. But anyways, he didn't have enough money, so even by the time he died, they were never able to really divorce because they just didn't have enough money. But they, Westhoff wanted a divorce, and Rilke was obviously willing to give it to her. So, but what's interesting is like, so we see like almost three dynamics that get presented, right? There's the wife that stays with the artist, supports him no matter what, and she just kind of melts in the background, right? Then there's like your like freeing part where right where Rilke, he feels bad. He wants he wants Westhoff to live her life, and live her artistic life. Well, that love falls apart, right? They even though yes, Westhoff does live her artistic life. She gets to do commissions for sculpting and everything like that, and Rilke continues on writing poetry. But see, all that stuff eventually fades in the background. Their love fell apart, so now they want a divorce, right? But there's a third dynamic, which is represented in Westhoff's friend's own relationship, because Westhoff's friend was I think Clara wanted to be was a painter, and she got married somewhere in Worpseed in Germany, and Clara, she was upset and kind of regretted that she settled down too early and she never got to live her artistic life. So this is like the third dynamic of between looking at Auguste Rodin and his love relationship, Rilke and his love relationship, and then there's Westhoff's friends Clara relationship, where she envies the fact that all her friends, all her artistic friends, are living their artistic lives. But here's the thing that happens to Clara, is that Clara, Westhoff's friend, ends up running away from the husband, going to Paris, and wanting to pursue that artistic life. And this is what happens. She doesn't get to act on it, basically. It fails. Her artistic life fails. She ends up getting little commissions, little recognition. She's not surviving as an artist. And so for Clara, she ends up biting the bullet and realizing that she writes this famous line to Rilke. She says, "I guess not all of us can go to heaven." And this later on will cause a lot of guilt in Rilke's life when she passes away, because he felt like he wasn't as supportive as he should have been to Westhoff's friend. Um, but but actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, there's four dynamics, because they talk about Andrea Salome, which was the lover, which was the muse of Nietzsche, temporary lover of Rilke, and so on. She ended up becoming a student of Freud. So Salome is a very interesting case study to look at too, because she married an intellectual man, but he failed. He ended up being like basically like a failure of like a intellectual. Like none of his stuff really kicked off. But Andrea Salome refused to be like tied down to any man. Even though she was married, she already had agreed with the person that she married. She said, "Look, like I'm going to allow you to have, love whoever you want, and I'm going to, and I'm going to love whoever I want." So basically, she's married, but she's running free, and she's pursuing her intellectual life. She eventually becomes a student for Freud, gets to study with Freud, anyways. But that's it, really. From what I'm understanding, even though she had Rilke as a lover for a while, she kind of ended up transitioning to like more of like a friend. friend type motherly slash role where sometimes Rilke would go through some really hard times and she would give him advice and tell him what to do, tell him, how to approach his art and writing again when he was in trouble. So now we kind of see like this dynamic, this really, I mean, for me, I feel like it's just not, there's not a good answer for this. You know, I almost feel like if, whatever person you fall in love with, I, I mean, I don't know. It seems like it works better if you have a lover that doesn't care really for your field. Um, but then I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's and then okay, so let's continue on. We can still bring up other people, right? So Nietzsche doesn't really, he doesn't end up with really a long term lover. And maybe this is what Alex Eber was talking about, like the problem of duration, right? So maybe there's that's what's going on with this, and that would actually complexify the problem. And but it still doesn't, for me, it still doesn't answer the question. Even if we take Alex Ebert's thing about we give precedence to duration, it still doesn't answer the question about what's the role of love in an artist or intellectual's life. I mean, for example, we talk about Carl Jung. Yeah, Carl Jung had, I think, a wife and children, but I believe he was also I think he was also playing with other women. He was still like getting with other women. And it seems to be a very common trait among intellectuals or and artists, in my opinion. Like just a very common thing because Freud did the same thing too. Freud, I believe, like his Freud had his wife and his wife's sister live with him, and him and his wife's sister were like having basically a secret relationship, I believe. Um, and I'm like trying to think of I'm trying to think of intellectuals where like it works, where but then it's like I'm trying to wrap my mind about, well, what, because again, if we take Alec Ebert's like provocative thing about our reverence for duration, right? Well, as long as it lasts, then that means it works. But I think clearly the example of Rodin's wife, Rodin's first wife, right, where she just kind of dissipates in the background. I mean, that they were still married, but was that really love? So what's the role of love in this intellectual and artist life? Because it just, for me, it seems like almost really clean cut with like, I don't know, if I was just like a businessman and my wife was like you know, she had another job and we had children and stuff, and it would be, but there's something about the artist life, the intellectual life, that almost demands you to give up something. I don't know if that makes any sense. Because I'm trying to think, I want to say like I don't even hear anything about Michelangelo's wife or Picasso's wife or uh, I'm gonna look it up after this, but it's like it really makes me it really makes me think about, even if we go to like religious figures, right? Like the saints, these really high saints. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe they were playing with women on the side, but like if they were, I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, you see the problem that we have here. What's that role that's supposed to be played? And that's kind of what I'm looking at now, uh, what I'm thinking about, because I've I've met some women. I believe there was a woman that, well, I don't know. She, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I've met some women that they were interested in the same things, and they ended up breaking away because it's like, I guess she felt she was just kind of like melting too much into his dream. And that is something, that is definitely something to think about. But when somebody has a dream, a big dream, a big dream, so big, a dream so big and so vast, who do we give that, precedence to? Um, do we say, actually, you know what, you support your dream, I'll support my dream? But I feel like with Westhoff and Rilke, that didn't really work, right? Isn't I mean, they keep their identity as artists, but then there's Rodin and his wife, where she kind of loses her identity to sustain this so-called marriage. Um, and then there's, Andrea Salome, where she says, love is whatever. I'm going to keep my intellectual life. She's like okay with that. She handles that fine. Then there's Clara, Westhoff's friend, that she feels kind of unhappy because she didn't get to live that artist life. But then when she finally starts living it, she realizes that it's not meant for her. Like, it's not going to happen. The cards just aren't in. She just doesn't have the ability. It's just not happening for her. And then so she succumbs to just a normal, very typical, marriage life. Have kids, raise them, grow up in a house. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that to ponder about when, I don't know. It's giving me a lot to think about when I read Rilke's life, Rodin's life. And I'm sure there's so many other intellectuals' life and artists' lives that it ends up being that almost like the role of love isn't really clear. I guess you could say it isn't really clear. It's almost like if you're gonna do this, then it's best that you know exactly what you're giving up. So that's how I look at it. It's best that you know exactly what you're giving up, because whatever fantasy you have about love and whatever fantasy you have about your artistic life, your intellectual life, it's going to collide all into one, and you're going to realize that you can't have both. You can't have your idealized notion of love and your idealized notion of artistic life or intellectual life. Um, and I guess that's why I find Rilke so inspiring to me, because the whole time he's asking, how do I live? How do I live life? Like, how do I deal with all this? Um, so, uh, so I don't know. I'm gonna leave that there to ponder for people. So that way we realize that you can fantasize about having this artistic life, this intellectual life, and then you can fantasize about having somebody that loves you, but realize that sometimes your own dreams, of becoming a grand artist, your own dreams of becoming this intellectual, can kill. Is going to kill all of your loves. It's going to kill all of them, right? But then there's the opposite, right? Where if you give in to that notion of love, it can possibly kill all of your lives of being an artist, of wanting to be an intellectual, wanting and so on. So it's something I feel like maybe not even a lot of people think about, honestly. And like I feel like there's a lot of case studies that we need to look at for intellectuals, because I really feel like when we talk about artists and intellectuals' love lives, they're all horrible in my opinion. They're all horrible. Like it's funny because we can always feel like we point out like, well, there's a couple that it looks like it works, but in my opinion, it's like I feel like that's always a facade. Like, yeah, it looks like it works in front of everybody, but I really they only know that it's not working. Um, and how one person can always shadow the other, right? Some people are so great that they just shadow the other. How do you deal with that, right? How do you deal with that when somehow you shadow your own wife when she wants to be an intellectual too, and then she's forever known as, I don't know, like Javier's wife. She's forever known as that. She's never known as her own entity. And this is something Rilke was, of course, very concerned about too. Um, I, I don't know. I can't imagine. I cannot. When I think about Nietzsche, I wonder Nietzsche. I'm kind of happy he never had somebody, because I feel like Nietzsche's so big that the wife would have never been anybody. She always would have been Nietzsche's wife. That's it. Plain and simple. Um, and I think intellectual women are a very good case study, because you have people like Andrea Salome, people like Anna Freud. I don't really know too much. I know more about Andrea Salome's love lives. I don't know too much about Anna Freud's. And I think, was it Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand? I feel like I don't know about her, but I feel like she was basically a loner too. Or she refused herself to get tied down. So it really makes me wonder what is the exact role of love in this, in an intellectual and artistic life. Because when I'm reading this biography of Rodin and Rilke's love life, I'm telling you right now, I was like, damn, I'm not happy about this. I was like, I am not happy about this. Which of course makes me reevaluate. It's like, well, do you really want? Do you want to be an intellectual? Really? Do you really want to be an artist? Um, Can it really work? Or is it that you probably shouldn't go for somebody that is within your same field because somehow one's going to shadow the other. One's going to shadow the other. Um, and if you do, are you willing to accept that you might be shadowed or you might shadow somebody else? Right. If you can accept those things, then like even Gibran, Khalil Gibran, one of my other favorite poets, I think he had a very distant relationship with his wife. He kept it very distant, the same way with Rilke he did with Westhoff, except I'm not really sure if it worked out for Gibran. I know it didn't work out for Rilke, but I'm not sure if it worked out for Gibran exactly. So again, those are things to think about. Now I'm very interested in looking up all the thinkers that I read, love lives. Even like the Sufi thinkers that I love, right? Ibn Arabi, I don't even think I don't even know. I don't even think, was he married? I don't even think he was married. So there's that. All right. I talked for too long. And I will, this will be the end. This is the end of the episode. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.